Hi, my name is Caleb Staten, and I could be considered a sixth-generation Weatherfordian. My mother grew up in this town, and her mother about 15 miles that way. While I never grew up here, only spending a couple weeks in summer vacations, this town is the closest I have to familial ties. So when I learned they had a Confederate statue, I was shocked. I've driven around this roundabout 100 times, always being pointed out the prestigious Parker County Courthouse, but never the Confederate statue that lay on this lawn. Why? Who erected the statue? Why is it still here? And what do we do about it? Only a few yards away from the statue lay a state history marker titled Parker County CSA. On the marker, it describes the founding of Parker County, wherein Weatherford lies. The county had no white settlers in 1850, and by 1860 it had 4,213 people, and in 1861 its voters favored secession, 535 to 61. The marker also names Oliver Loving, a local rancher who gave hundreds of heads of cattle to the Confederate Army, who they pride protected the city from bloody Indian raids, and General John R. Baylor, who captured Arizona for the Confederacy. The marker finally pridefully notates that Parker County sent the Confederate Army 9 companies, or around 900 men. Both John R. Baylor and Oliver Loving were confirmed to be slave owners, as well as no doubt many of the other countless men praised but not named in the statue nor this marker. But it is not something that any marker or memorial mentions nor admits. The history of slaves within Weatherford is a confusing and a difficult one. This courthouse is not the first iteration of one here in Weatherford. The first was wooden, temporary, and demolished in favor of a stone building, which burned down in 1874, as well as the one after that in 1884. This final iteration was built in 1886, so most local documentation and archives were lost in the fires of Courthouse 2 and 3. Most documentation of slaves, slaveholding, and slave selling were lost, but not all. A few local historians and scholars have been able to track down papers that prove that slavery existed in Weatherford, obviously, and that that culture was just as ingrained as anywhere else in the Confederacy, despite its distance. In 1864, there were 486 slaves listed in Parker County, worth almost $4.2 million. A will from 1860 that survived the numerous courthouse fires details instructions to sell their Negro boy at the public sale at the courthouse, probably just steps away from where I am standing now. According to local, albeit unacademic history books, this courthouse was also the site of the hanging of 4 young enslaved men near the end of the Civil War. This history is silenced and removed from the statue and any accompanying historical markers. Why would these facts not be mentioned? What group erected the statue and removed any mention of slavery? Well, the United Daughters of the Confederacy. This statue and memorial were installed in 1915, 50 years from the end of the Civil War, 38 from the counter-revolution that deposed Reconstruction, and 110 years from today. This statue was erected by the San Lanham chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, or UDC, named after an ex-Confederate and former Texas governor who retired and died in Weatherford. The memorial is dedicated to the honor of the United Confederate veterans of Parker County, 1861 to 1865. Both the UDC and the United Confederates Veterans, who the memorial is stated towards, were organizations created after the Civil War, both with the purpose to honor, celebrate, and protect the heritage of the Confederacy. The UDC's explicit goal upon founding in 1894 was to tell the glorious fight against the greatest odds the nation ever faced, that their hallowed memory should never die. This chapter, along with various UDC chapters, UCV chapters, Sons of Confederate Veterans chapters, Southern historians, politicians, and filmmakers all participated in the creation of a new narrative surrounding the Civil War, one of honorable struggle from the South and evil domination from the North. This narrative would become known as the Lost Cause, and is the principal understanding of the Civil War that dominates the minds of people today. The Lost Cause narrative, or as I prefer to understand it, myth, also claims slavery was not an issue during the Civil War, that slaves generally preferred the practice of slavery, or that slavery was bad, but only a small minority owned slaves. This mythical nature surrounding slavery helped to protect the fragile ego of the so-called Southern gentlemen, who never quite got over the loss of the war and of their right to own humans as chattel. It was with this project in mind that this memorial was erected. The Sam Lanham chapter of the UDC, while they were fundraising to erect this monument, read aloud from the vindication of the Ku Klux Klan in their meetings. A handful of years later, Klan members would be seen around Weatherford reserving full-page hate ads in the local newspaper. The KKK had public rallies near the statue and elsewhere in town, on and off, until the 1990s, when counter-protesters were starting to consistently overwhelm them. 5 years ago, the controversy surrounding the statue truly started. Middle of June 2020. Parker County's Commissioner Court held a meeting over the Confederate statue that lay on the Parker County Courthouse lawn. But this meeting ended with questions, not answers. Who owned the statue? Was it the county or the United Daughters of the Confederacy? Late July, after numerous confusing council meetings, UDC was found the owner of this Confederate statue. The statue was placed on county land, but was not county property, and so could not be removed by the county. Two massive protests, one for the removal and one against, were initiated. Large groups of neo-Confederates showed up, sporting Confederate flags, Texas flags, signs, and weapons. One man sat in his truck bed with a sniper rifle, while another meandered the lawn with an axe. Two men were arrested for an attempt to incite violence. Several fights occurred, but the police did not intervene. Parker County Judge Pat Dean announced that the county and the UDC were in agreement that the statue would be moved to a new location, and that UDC already had a new site picked out. However, UDC would have to fundraise for its removal. But as you can clearly see, the statue is still here. So what happened? A few days after the protests, the County Commissioners Court held another meeting, where they voted 5-0 to keep the Confederate statue on county grounds. Dorothy Norrid, the president of Texas United Daughters of the Confederacy, said of the vote, and I quote, "They knew if they voted for it to be moved, they would not get reelected to their position." Late August, another combative protest occurred just after the NAACP formally requested the removal of the statue. In October, supporters of the statue held a demonstration with Confederate flags on county courthouse grounds. Still, Weatherford citizens pleaded their elected representatives to take action, like Eddie Burnett in mid-December of 2020. However, it slowly petered out. There has been no discussion of the Confederate statue in the town's newspaper since 2020. People began forgetting about the entire ordeal. County commissioners entered and left office, BLM signs have come and gone, as have the public Confederate flags. But the statue is still here, and in it engraved the Confederate name and the Confederate legacy. So what is to be done? Do we leave it here to move on to the next statue, to the next fight, to an easier fight? Well, to many people, to Weatherford residents, there is no moving on. So if you can't move it, and legally there is no way to move it, what do? There is one way, to not move the statue, but to reframe it. If you can't place this statue in a museum, why not place the museum around it? There is the obvious issue, that this statue lays on government ground. But with a favorable commissioner's court, you can place another statue, one that better addresses the silences made by the Confederate veteran statue right next to it. Even more out of the box, you could create a sculpture, one that quite literally encases the statue. That way it remains, but no longer impacts. Would that be a useful solution? Undoubtedly, it would get the Confederate statue moved. But should our attempts to rectify past horrors completely erase them? If this cubicle structure was engraved with facts and information, things that would expand the understanding of the viewers around the Confederacy and an understanding of the Confederate statue it erases, it could be a net positive. Yet, without thousands of dollars and massive public and legal support, this future will not occur. The statue will remain, staring into the abyss of a roundabout, a beacon for hate, for heritage, and history. Thank you. Got stared down by a cop. Okay.